right, here we go. What's going on out there, world? It's your boy Tommy on the spot for Watch Along Wrestling. We are now going to take a look at day 4, the Saturday of the SummerSlam 2021 vlog. We are walking around. We had now moved in to the Treasure Island Resort, and so I'm trying to show everybody that we had done that. And this is SummerSlam Saturday, so we're very excited about this. I'm also pumped up because that morning we were able to score some tickets to go to SummerSlam. Remember, I had said earlier in the week we didn't have tickets, so because it was a weird vibe. We were just trying to see if tickets were going to go down. My thought process was ticket prices might plummet because a lot of the cases of COVID were soaring in the West Coast. We almost didn't go on the trip, but since we did go on the trip, we decided to make sure that I wanted to kind of keep an eye on ticket prices and see everything. And in doing so, what we ended up doing was getting like VIP tickets that were awesome. And they were like $75 each, typically like $300. You see the Mirage there. Sigmund and Roy, is that their names? They're there, but that's a cool little statue. And we are now walking along here, and you know, the wrestling fan in me is starting to look for Caesar's Palace, birthplace of WrestleMania 9, so I could show some of that off here on the vlog. Always got you guys. I always got you covered. Even if you look in the archives from my first trip to Vegas, I even went to the place where Triple H and Stephanie got married and did a video on that. So always, always back in my mind, the wrestling fan in me. No matter where I am, I'm looking for that wrestling tie-in somewhere. I remember this being ungodly hot. If you can't tell in this video, we're super excited we get out. My wife's looking good. I'm looking good. 20 minutes later, we're walking up and down the strip and dying. It was like 110 degrees, straight desert heat, brutal. And so the fun vibe that we had walking across this was suddenly, okay, let's get into a place as quick as we can because we need to get in there and, cool down. So we're at the Vanderpump Vegas Cocktail Garden. My mom, again, shout out to her, I'll put her over again, is hanging out outside with Dakota somewhere else because we had to walk so far away, and we were going to kind of all try to get lunch together while out there. So Vanderpump Garden, that is something my wife wanted to go do. So we're having some drinks. She had a drink called the Macho Man, and it was the Matcha Man, and knew I was going to do a Randy Savage impression pretty much on cue, and I did not let her down. Not a great Randy Savage impersonation, but I did do one. So we're each going through each ingredient in our drink. That's probably interesting for my wife and I. Not sure how interesting it is for anyone else, but there we are. But yeah, we are dressed to the nines. It is pretty early in the morning, I remember that day, because we wanted to make sure we tried this cocktail garden that Vanderpump has. Vanderpump also has a restaurant in LA that we also went to. And I will say that the cocktail garden in Vegas was much nicer than the restaurant. The restaurant had a good vibe to it. Food was way overpriced and not good. It was just very small, and it was just, I think my wife and I split an appetizer and just called it a day. It just was not good, but I have quite a big drink over there. One of the things I always like, if you look behind me, we're in this like fancy schmancy little cocktail garden, but right behind me is just the corridor of the hotel of where we're at. So you see all the people walking back and forth. But look at us here. I'm in like a fancy little button-down shirt. My wife is like in a nice fancy dress, and I really think it's like 11 o'clock in the morning. Here I'm taking a sip of this, and and I am historic for saying anything is great whenever I try. So that is almost always my facial expression whenever I try a drink. It's always, oh, let me try it. And then if something's good, I usually go, oh, wow, I wasn't expecting it to be that good, or something to that extent. And it's amongst family and friends, it's become almost a little silly and a bit of a joke. But my drink was a great drink there. My wife even saying she really appreciates that drink. We spent a lot of time here walking around and kind of taking it all in. And it's SummerSlam Saturday. And so I'm already, at this point, starting to get a little nervous. I'm like, I want to make sure we make it to SummerSlam nice and early, take everything in, and make sure that we get everything well ahead of time. But instead, I did also want to make sure my wife enjoyed this experience because she was really looking forward to going here. So we had a little dessert to split and a really great time at this cocktail garden. A great way to start the day. I always like to do something to start the day early, but once that middle of the day kind of comes along, we got a cake. This is a small cake, but still, I don't think we need a cake to get our day started. But here we are. We're chowing down on cake and drinks, and pretty much being as bougie as one could be. I can't even imagine what the bill here cost for this cake and drinks, but I can't imagine it was very cheap. If you get a sense from the vibe. My wife, though, thoroughly enjoyed. My wife, a cake connoisseur, loves all things cake, so she was really happy to be here. And I'm taking in some of the vibes of it. It's a nice little place, don't get me wrong, and nice to kind of spend some time there. But I think at this stage, I'm already starting. I know we brought Grandma, so we've got to get lunch with Grandma before we leave and go to SummerSlam. So I think part of me is starting to get a little nervous. And now we've spent a good portion of the time. We're out of our fancy clothes. You can see we've got our drinks that we probably got along the strip. My wife probably looks a little wavy at this stage. We probably spent a good amount of the time there, having the cocktails and enjoying Vegas. I have a drink in my hand. We're both probably a little bit buzzed as we're getting ready to head over to Allegiant Stadium, which was the time that Allegiant Stadium, I think it's its first event or second event that they had done, and it was for SummerSlam. Big mistake I made here was taking an Uber to Allegiant Stadium. You didn't have to. If you're on the strip, you could walk literally the whole way through. We ended up doing that on the way back. We ended up walking the whole strip from Allegiant Stadium all the way back to Treasure Island. It's right near Excalibur, so we should have stayed actually at Excalibur. But from where we were at, we got a pretty cheap Uber. I remember my buddy Katema, who you'll see here in a bit, he actually ended up finding some wrestling fans who were driving there and just jumped in the car with them and got himself a ride. But you can see Allegiant Stadium fancy as can be. And I've been to Allegiant Stadium and SoFi. I think Allegiant Stadium is actually nicer than SoFi Stadium. I know people love SoFi. I think Allegiant Stadium is just as good as it could be. This is one of my favorite scenes is my buddy Katema walking by there. We're having a good time. He was at the show. We had to catch up. We had to meet up. He was hoping that my daughter was going to be at the show. And honestly, we should have brought her. We did not know that a lounge was going to be connected to where we were sitting in that VIP section. My mom and daughter could have totally came and enjoyed and watched SummerSlam on the screens at least and taken some of that in. But Katame was excited. He's pumped up. He's from LA. So Katame and I had met in Brooklyn College. We had gone there for our master's degree. He moved out to LA after, but we've kept in touch. We've remained good friends, and whenever we get an opportunity, we try to see him. So we saw him here, and then we saw him at WrestleMania 39. We're talking about who we want to win the match, and he is very much behind the tribal chief. He's saying, fuck Mr. Missionary in regards to John Cena, because remember that was the big thing going into this, was the missionary promo from Roman Reigns. So it was very, very interesting. And we're going through some more predictions of the matches. I felt bad for him. He has a Sasha Banks shirt on. If you remember going into SummerSlam, Sasha was actually advertised to be against Bianca Belair on that show right up until the show. And then they pulled her from the show at the very last minute. It was kind of shady because WWE is even selling Sasha Banks, Bianca Belair rematch shirts at the Superstore all weekend. And you could tell poor Katama, he's got a Sasha shirt on. He's super stoked. And that rematch never happened, which is, at least I don't think it did. But pretty disappointing. They end up pulling this match, and that's the end of that. And we were just, happy to catch up. And I love this scene. It's probably one of my favorite parts of the entire vlog is me and Katama being able to catch up there and see each other a little bit. And again, we'd reconnect over at WrestleMania. My wife is very excited about this VIP section. I don't think she was expecting this at all. I was not expecting this at all. But this is about as fancy as it gets. You got your little cantina club. And one of the things that was interesting about Allegiant Stadium this night is that the food was actually not really working at the regular sections. But we didn't even know that because at our little section here, which looks like an airport lounge in the middle of where we were sitting, they had all the food was top notch. It was perfect. We didn't even know. And then you literally just walked right through the lounge and right down to your seats. And look at these seats. $75 for these seats. These are awesome. Just one section off the ground. Place is packed with people. They did not sell the section I'm not showing. I don't know if I eventually show it. We're not selling seats over there. That was initially supposed to be where they were going to do the the big kind of Titantron. And instead, they ended up going with the ramp. As my wife's mentioning, this reminds me of Arizona, because when we went for Royal Rumble 19, it was a similar type of entrance setup. And you can see that entire section there, the tarped off section that for some reason, there it is. I don't know why I was not showing it. But yeah, they didn't sell any seats there, because initially that was supposed to be where it was. So instead they had some media people set up there. There's some fans dressed as Ric Flair. Remember, people are still pumped up. This is like the first time being at a show in a long time. And I will say this is probably also the first time I got a little nervous about being in with so many people, because you're right next to each other. This is not limited capacity. And so it was a little nerve-wracking being at such a place with so many people, kind of for the first time during the pandemic. But thankfully we escaped kind of unscathed. You can see Shinsuke Nakamura entrance, Pat McAfee loving it. He's up on the table. Thought he was a great announcer. And this is the first of two huge surprises for the night. This has become standard at SummerSlam, is the big surprise returns now. You had Becky Lynch, and that was like, we couldn't believe it. We were so stoked for her entrance. Then you had the great Brood entrance for Edge. I do think they overdid it a little bit with the Brood stuff. That was only such a small part of Edge's run, but at the same time, it was interesting. It was cool. And this is a very rare, I don't do this often, a very rare instant reaction from the crowd. I know people love doing that. I don't typically do them. My wife and I are legitimately stoked for the return of Brock Lesnar. You remember, this is the first time that Brock Lesnar has really been a part of WWE since the pandemic, and I do think there was starting to get some rumblings that, he's getting a little older. Maybe he's just done. And instead, he's kind of had this run that I think he's kind of been on here these last 2 years as this big, jolly baby face. But here he is laying out John Cena with F5s. And it's interesting looking back at this match. I loved it. I thought it was great. I really genuinely believed that John Cena was going to win the title and have a short reign and eventually kick it back to Roman. Because remember, we're still a year in at this stage. So I don't think that any of us really knew that they were planning to have Roman hold the title for so long. Roman had the belt about a year, and I thought, you know what, maybe they go for John Cena winning the title, and instead they went with Roman, did a deal. This is the second straight pay-per-view where it ended with Roman Reigns telling people to acknowledge him and who should show up, but first time it was John Cena, which was like, holy crap, and then it was Brock Lesnar, and when Brock shows up, I remember... that's the deal where Michael Cole is like, holy, and Pat McAfee is doing the, say it. But my wife's favorite wrestler of all time is Brock Lesnar. She just absolutely eats everything up the guy does, just thinks he's great. So not only do we get Becky Lynch on the show, but we got Brock Lesnar. I think there's like a fever pitch for, okay, wrestling is back. And it's been fun ever since. I really do think that they've been doing really well with everything since really the start of this. So let's get back into one more video at the end just to kind of do the wrap up, and then we'll take it from there.